Good evening. This is what was in the post this morning. The new Anne Cleeves book. How lucky am I? Very, because I'm also getting to interview the lovely Anne with Forum Books on the 6th of September. You can't be in the bookshop, but you can virtually. So follow Forum Books on Twitter and they'll send you the link, okay? So if you pre-order through Forum Books, you get a copy of a short story that Anne wrote specifically for Forum Books, set in Forum Books. It's a Vera short story and it's wonderful. Anyway, enough of that. Welcome to Virtual Noir at the Bar 20. Jeez. I'm Vic Watson, but tonight we have reading for your delight and delectation. Kate Helm, Sandra Ireland, Tom Benjamin, Brian Stewart, Caroline England, Abbie Osborne, Rachel Bennett, Minishi, Paul Finch, and Will Carver. Woo! Just a quick word about the woos if you haven't joined us before. The woos are not sarcastic. They are very, very serious. So if you do hear anything during the evening that you like the sound of, do give us a woo! While I'm pulling names from one of our two hats this evening, do give me a drum roll. That would be really lovely, just so that I don't feel alone. The reason we've got two hats is we have a wild card this evening. So for the first time ever at Virtual Noir at the Bar, we have 9 readers who are in the hat, and one will be joining us to read later on this evening. So we've got Angie Plant, Gitta Edelman, Susanna Callahan, Marina Sophia, Julia Randy, Paul Davidson, Wendy Turbin, Kevin Ferguson, and Sherilyn Wilcox. Ooh, it's so exciting. The music you've just heard is from Lloyd Cole, and I think Jason Isaacs will be joining us during the breaks as well. If you would like to enter the draw to win a free book, please email vnatb20@gmail.com with the subject line, the big 20. You can just put 20, it's fine. So I think that's all I've got to tell you. Oh, if you hear something you like the sound of, nominate it for our quote of the week. Drop it in the chat. Just say quote of the week and then let me know what you want to nominate and we'll get that sorted for you. If you have any questions for any of our answers, oh God, it started already. For any of our authors, drop it in the Q&A box and I'll certainly try my best to ask them at some point in the evening. So welcome everyone to our 20th Virtual Noir at the Bar. Without further ado, I'm going to get this hat, give it a shake and pull a name out. I hope you're giving us a drum roll, mind. First up tonight, D.A. Mashani. Allow me to tell you about D.A. Mashani. He is a best-selling crime writer, screenwriter, and literary scholar, specialising in the history of crime fiction. Woo! He's in good hands then. He is the author of the acclaimed Detective Avram series, translated into more than 20 languages. Ooh! Made into films and TV series. Woohoo! Draw lives with his wife and 2 children in Tel Aviv and teaches at the University of Tel Aviv. So everybody, huge round of applause all the way from Tel Aviv. D.A. Mashani.
Thank you very much, Vic, and thank you for the invitation. I'm very, very happy to be there. Here from Tel Aviv. I would have preferred to be in England, but these are the terms. So I'll read from my new book that is a standalone novel. It's not one of the series. It's called 3, and I think it just comes out in English. It was translated by Jessica Cohen, she's a wonderful translator, and I think she won the Man Booker Prize for translating David Grossman. So she won't win it again with me, but she did an amazing work. So I'm reading from 3, but so it's my words, but it's also Jessica's words. They met on a dating site for divorced singles. His profile was unexciting, which was exactly why she wrote to him. 42 years old, divorced once, lives in a Tel Aviv suburb. Not excited to swallow life whole or on a self-discovery journey I'd like you to join me on. 2 kids, 5'8", college educated, self-employed, financially stable. Political opinions, none. Some other items were left incomplete too. 3 pictures, one old and 2 that seemed slightly newer, all of which showed something reassuring about his face, nothing too special. He wasn't overweight. Eran, her son, had started therapy, and his therapist said it would be good for Eran to see that she was not just grieving, but starting to move on with her life. She tried to get the 2 of them back into a routine. Supper at 7, shower, 1 TV show, and then they both got their bags ready for the morning. At 8:30 or 8:45, Eran would be in bed and she'd read him a story, even though he could read on his own, because it wasn't a good time to stop. After that, she'd sit at the computer desk in the corner of the living room, reviewing profiles and reading messages, even though she knew she wasn't going to write back to any men who contacted her. She preferred initiating contact herself. It was late March, but in the evening she wore a jumper, and sometimes it was raining lightly when she got into bed alone. She sent him a message. "I'd be happy to get to know you." And he answered 2 days later, "Let's do it. How?" They had an online chat. "What school do you teach at? Primary, secondary?" "Secondary." "Can you say which one?" "I'd rather not give details for now. It is in Holon." She was cautious. He was revealing. The items left blank on his profile were filled out as their conversations progressed. He liked to ride his bike, mostly on Saturdays, in Yalcon Park. "After neglecting my body for years, I've started going to the gym too. Delightful." She didn't think you could tell from the pictures. He was a lawyer, not one of those sharks, just an independent lawyer with my own little firm, and most of his work involved verifying eligibility and submitting applications for Polish, Romanian, and Bulgarian citizenship for Israelis with roots in those countries. He got into the field after working for a few years in the legal department of an unemployment agency that brought foreign workers to Israel from Eastern Europe. And that's how he built up contacts in the various departments of interiors. "Would you happen to need a Polish passport?" he asked, and she wrote back, "No chance, my parents are from Libya. Do you have contacts with Gaddafi?" Her friends at the school warned her against internet chats. They said you couldn't believe what people said about themselves. But he didn't say anything unusual about himself. On the contrary, it was as if he were trying to sound ordinary. After corresponding for a few days, he asked, "Are we going to meet eventually?" And Orna wrote, "Yes, eventually." Thank you. Thanks, Vic, for inviting me. I was happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Draw. I know you're a couple of hours ahead, so
Yes.
we really do appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, before we get on to the second reader of tonight, I forgot to mention a couple of things. There's thunder and lightning going on all over the UK and actually all over everywhere, I think, definitely Europe. So please pray for our internet signals. If you lose us or, you know, you can't make somebody out, forgive us. We try to control everything we can, but we can't control the weather. And also thank you to everybody who's donated to keep Virtual Noir at the Bar running through this co-filing. I am a little bit behind on saying thank you to everybody, but we do really, really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, are you rolling the drums? Next reader is Abbie Osborne, and she's delighted because she didn't want to go too near the end. I know you'll be kind to her. Abigail is lovely, but she's very nervous. Abigail Osborne is originally from the Lake District, but moved to the West Midlands for university and fell in love with the area. She is a self-declared crazy cat lady and a passionate reader with an unsustainable collection of books. You're in good company here. Abigail is currently working on book 2 and looks forward to publishing that soon. So everybody, huge, lovely VNAP round of applause for Abigail Osborne.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. So I'm going to read from my book, The Puppet Master, which I think may be coming up backwards. But oh, good, that's all right then. So I'm actually reading part way into chapter 1. So there's 2 main characters in this book, and we've met the first one, Billy. She's in a coffee shop and has met the second character, Adam. So she is hiding from the world, and we don't know why yet. And now this is Adam's recollection of that meeting. So I'm going to read that to you now. Okay, so Adam. Adam rushed into the bookshop at breakneck speed. He hadn't finished the article for his fortnightly column, Bizarre Things to Do in the West Midlands. The bookshop was his last hope of making the deadline. He hoped he would find some inspiration for content, as this week he hadn't felt like leaving his flat. His father had informed him that Uncle Eric had lost yet another job, and he could no longer afford to continue living in an apartment in Windermere. His pension just would not stretch. His uncle had recently moved to Bromsgrove for this reason, to be closer to Adam and his father, but he was struggling financially. Adam knew his father would not dream of helping out his older brother, so he was worried. He looked around the shop, shaking the negative thoughts from his head. He needed to get this story in. There was a vacancy coming up at the paper, and he was desperate to get into hardcore journalism instead of being a columnist. He had enjoyed doing the column at first, because it gave him the opportunity to do things he was never allowed to do while growing up. After his mother died, his father lost his will to live. Adam's life centered around navigating his father's moods and taking care of him. The column had made up for that, but now he was ready to take the next step. His column was a step on the ladder of an oversaturated, cutthroat industry, but he had no intention of staying there. Having found a book that contained enough details for Adam to use and make it sound authentic, he decided to go to the cafe in the bookshop. Hunger was gnawing at his stomach. The cafe was a bit expensive, but the waitresses were usually hot, and they did a great BLT. He was busy staring at the sizable assets of one of the waitresses when he realised he'd not checked if there was anywhere for him to sit. Luckily, he spotted a small redhead sitting alone at a table for 2. He was about to walk over when her familiar face stopped him in his tracks. He knew this girl. Hers was a face he would never forget. She was a liar and a homewrecker. As he walked towards her, a plan formulated in his mind. His instinct for a story was awakened, and he knew he had the opportunity of a lifetime. This could be his ticket to a better career, and more importantly, he could get justice. As he got to her table, and as soon as she realised his intention to join her, a flush spread across her cheeks. She looked at him with wariness in her emerald eyes, framed by ruby red hair that contrasted with her porcelain skin. She looked ethereal, fragile. He took in the black dress that defined her shapely curves and sat down. He knew she was uncomfortable with his presence by the stilted answers she gave to his questions and the fact she barely looked at him. His editor, John, was always saying that Adam was going to make it someday because he just had a way with people. He could sense enough about a person to know how to work them. With her, he sensed that she had perfected the appropriate rebuffs so that she wouldn't have to interact with anyone. So he made sure to wrong-foot her. He did not expect to find that behind her faint smile was a touch of sadness. He would not be swayed by this, though. He knew that the air of fragility and loneliness was a mask. She was a girl who could, and already had, destroyed lives. No, he would not squander this chance. He felt anger burning inside him as he thought about what she had done, but he knew he needed to harness that anger and turn it into determination. Taking a deep breath, he turned up his charm dial and decided to take advantage of this opportunity. He knew this girl had wrecked lives, and he was going to get her story. He just needed for her to trust him enough to tell it. That meant getting through the barriers she had so expertly constructed around herself. He felt sick with each smile that he flashed at her. She had caused untold damage, and yet here she was, sitting in a cafe, living with none of the repercussions her victims had to endure. Adam decided it was time that changed. Diary entry. I watch her as she walks from the street into the estate full of corporate offices. I am parked in the car park. I made sure I woke early so I could get this exact spot. It gives me the best view of her. She is a creature of habit. I'd wager that her foot lands in the exact same part of each slab of paving every day. While I was waiting for her to turn up, I am entertained by the parking wars going on around me. I don't mind waiting. I enjoy the anticipation. Today she is wearing the same black trousers, which are far too big for her, with a matching oversized black top that sticks out from her black raincoat. On a dark night, she would be invisible. Her head is down. I sometimes wonder if it is stuck like that. She never makes eye contact with anyone, and I wonder if it is the weight of her shame that makes her hang her head and keeps her body hunched. I stare at her so intently, it is a wonder she cannot feel the heat from my gaze. I assess every part of her. She's no open book, and my eyes bore into her, longing to penetrate her skin, trying to see a flicker of what she might be feeling. All I can tell is what everybody else would see if they bothered to study her. She is unhappy, trying to blend into the background wherever she goes. She is timid and purposely keeps everyone at arm's length. I cannot contain the joy I feel at having this knowledge. I feed off it. It rejuvenates me, knowing that she is suffering after all the damage she has done. But I will get more justice. Each floor of the building is visible through the large windows that cover one side. It seems to be a modern preference now, opening buildings to the world. There is no such thing as privacy anymore. I can just make out her moving form. I couldn't believe my luck when I realised that I could see part of her cubicle from the car park. I wait until I see her sit down, back facing the window, then I drive off. She's made it so easy for me. Her flat is a 5-minute drive from here, and I leisurely pull up in front of it. As I unlock the door to her home, I snigger at how someone so fearful could live somewhere with such pitiful security. A cup of tea, a well-spun lie, and a smile to the friendly landlady who lives in the first floor flat, and I was given a spare key. I walk into the studio apartment, and I sit in the solitary black armchair. I see a cat dart under the bed. I begin to feel angry as I look around and see how cosy and tidy the flat is. She, who has ruined so many lives, has a warm and comfortable place to live. It isn't right. She should suffer for what she has done. She has ruined everything. I breathe in deeply, forcing down my righteous anger. I will make her pay. She will feel the pain that she has caused me. I get up from the chair and explore, my mind filling with delicious possible ways to make her suffer the most. All done. That's a bit.
Well done, Abigail, well done. Okay, well, there you go. We're already getting some lovely comments in the chat, so congratulations. I know it wasn't easy for you, but you've done really well. Just a reminder, folks, as well. Oh, bless her. You do have the option to ask questions of our readers if you are so inclined. Just drop them in the Q&A box and I will do my best to ask them at some point in the evening. On to our third reader this evening. Drum roll, please. It is, whoops, Sandra Ireland. Sandra Ireland is the author of 3 psychological thrillers, Beneath the Skin, Bone Deep, and The Unmaking of Ellie Rook, all published by Polygon. Sight Unseen, book 1 of her new Sarah Sutherland series, will be out on August the 13th. That's tomorrow. It's out tomorrow. Get your pre-orders in now, folks. Sandra lives in Carnoustie and is a creative writing tutor at the University of Dundee and Lifelong Learning Dundee. So everybody, the lovely, lovely, lovely Sandra Ireland.
Hi everybody, it's great to be here. This is my first time at Virtual Noir at Bar. And as you've just heard, I'm going to read you a little bit from Sight Unseen, which is out tomorrow, just to remind you. So this is the first, it's my 4th novel, but it's the first in my Sarah Sutherland series. Sarah is just an ordinary woman, as we would say up here in Scotland. She's an ordinary wee wifey. She's holding down a job. She's looking after her father. She's trying to keep tabs on her daughter. But the one little glimmer of light that she has is that in an evening, she dresses in a black frock and takes the tourists around the old town of Kilgour. She takes them on a witch walk and tells them the story of Ailey Gowdy, who is the town's most notorious witch. So if you can imagine it, she has a little crowd of witch hunters with her. They have been in the company of Ailey and the other witches for over an hour, got to know them a little. Plus, they're beginning to unwind these people, chattering among themselves. The Americans and the guy with the scarf are talking about Harry Potter as if he's a real person, and the teenagers are wading in with endless movie references. It transpires that the hot star of Lowlander began his career with a bit part in the Potter franchise. There's a lot of bonding going on, but I can feel Ailey being nudged to one side, not on my watch. She is the star of the show. So, I say, we were talking about Archibald Donald and how he wanted his revenge on Ailey Gowdy. All eyes are on me again. He reported to the clerk session that she'd been talking to the little people in the wood. She could describe them in great detail, a fairy host. He accused her of using sorcery to summon the fairy folk, and worse, he said he saw her dancing with the devil. A gasp from the audience. Gasp. The devil is always the trump card. Where, they all wanted to know, where did she dance? And I said, follow me. Once you mention the devil, you can feel the energy in a group begin to shift. People draw closer together. They look over their shoulders and imagine the air just got a few degrees colder. The timid ones quicken their pace so they don't have to be last in line. As they follow me through the town on the last leg of our tour, I can feel someone breathing down my neck. I suspect it's one of them and not old Nick. Maybe they will see something too. We all think that, don't we? If somebody tells us a place is haunted, you always hope that you'll be the one to see something. I know just where to take them, to reveal all those ancient scribbles in the landscape that modern folk can't read. We're all incomers, flitting across the surface of what's gone before. At certain judicious points, I produce the artifacts from my bag. Watercress used to bewitch the best of the milk from the cows, red thread for binding spells, rowan for protection, just in case. And of course, a genuine set of pilnywinks, thumb screws for extracting those confessions. I leave the best to last. The Borough Square, the Market Cross, where in 1648, Alison Gowdy, the young wife who used to live in my cottage, was accused of dancing with the devil. Ailey's dancing is the stuff of legend, whispered around the fire with the curtains drawn and the shapes shifting on the ceiling. From that simple source, the yarn has been spun by a handful of local historians into something firm, authoritative. But the truth is, we don't know the truth. Nothing of Ailey's experience survives. She didn't leave a diary or a letter or anything that might give us a clue. I've decorated this house from top to bottom, hoping to find scribblings under the wallpaper, hidden papers, anything that might fill in the gaps, but it's been fruitless. When people ask me if I've ever experienced anything in the house, Ailey and Robert's house, I always laugh it off and say no, but that's not strictly true either. One morning I woke too early, 5 o'clock or thereabouts. Maybe I had a day off, maybe I was tired. Anyway, I let myself drift back to sleep. And then I saw her. I saw Ailey Gowdy, dressed in a fine gown. The fabric was bright, much brighter than you'd imagine. But maybe that's the upside of marrying a weaver. A specially designed dusky pink plaid. Was it a fair day or a holiday? In my dream, she gazed right at me, the incomer. It was a businesslike appraisal, as if I were a bale of flax or a laying hen. I remember thinking she'd drive a hard bargain in the marketplace. As happens in dreams, the questions all stuck fast to the roof of my mouth, and maybe she felt the same. In the dream, I'm outside. I'm in the market square in my pyjamas, and the cobbles ripple beneath my bare feet as if someone is shaking the dust from a rug. I lose track of what is sleeping and what is waking, who is living and who is dead. The cobbles turn to gravestones and the gravestones into gargoyles, the weird faces you see high up in church, all reptilian, repulsive, with stone wrinkles and snake tongues and horns. Ailey's there. She's dancing with one of the horned ones. Is there just the one? I'm so terrified I wake up. Do I tell this to my little band of walkers? No. It isn't fact, is it? I stick to what we know of as the truth. Archibald Donald saw Ailey Gowdy dancing with a dark stranger around the Market Cross. The man had the face of a demon with red eyes and horns like a ram. As my clients approach the door of the Black Bull at the end of the tour, I like to think I've left them slightly altered. The teenagers have pocketed their mobiles and are sporting sprigs of brown in their hair. Pearl, one of the Americans, has shed her wind cheater despite the chill, and the two guys are surreptitiously holding hands, more out of fear, I suspect, than affection. My job is done. Oh, wow, that was just terrific. Frank rubs his hands together. So much history for such a small place. Can we buy you a drink, a wee dram? His attempt at a Scottish accent is amusing, and they offer kind, but I hesitate. I have seen a missed call on my mobile and it's haunting me. My phone is ticking away at the bottom of my bag like an unexploded bomb. I have to make a quick call. You go ahead. You've been a brilliant bunch, thanks. You all deserve a wee dram. I acknowledge the praise and the handshakes as they file into the pub. A cold glass of Pinot Grigio will go down very nicely, but I'm left alone in the night air scrabbling for my mobile. Squinting at the screen, I realise with a sick lurch that there's a voicemail from my father. Something is amiss. Why would you want to get in touch with me so urgently when I've just visited him? My brain downloads possibilities as I stab out the numbers of my voicemail. Impatiently, I listen to the familiar recording. You have one new message. For your messages, press 2. A crackle of white noise, and then Dad's voice breaks in. Sarah, it's your father here. Spot of bother at this end, but the firemen are here now. And that's it. Over to you, Vic. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sandra, but we're actually going to stick with you because we've got a couple of questions coming.
Oh, great. Okay.
So Marina Sophia would like to know, is this based on a real historical figure?
It's based on a sort of an amalgam of witches that I live on the east coast of Scotland, so we have a long history of witch trials up here, and we have some quite notorious witches. So Ailey Gowdy is kind of a fusion of all of them.
Brill, thank you. And Alex Hawley would like to know, what is it about witches that made you want to start a new series?
Well, the whole series isn't about witches, just the first book is about witches. But I think it's because they don't have a voice. The only clue we have as to what happened to them is the transcriptions from the trials, which are probably biased. We don't know, so we've never heard their voices. So I wanted to put that right.
Brill, thank you so much. And
thank you.
I think we've got a few people who fancy a witch walk after that. So thank you. Okay, and we are down to one more reading before we go to a break, or before I should say, we pick our wild card out. Ooh. And our fourth reader of the evening is Brian Stewart. Brian Stewart was born in Glasgow and lived most of his life in Nairn near Inverness. He worked in education in various roles and is now retired, living in Broughty Ferry near Dundee, and he's very focused on his writing now. He has self-published 2 novels. The third in the series was published by Thunderpoint. Brian's hobbies include travel and trying to play golf and the guitar. So everybody, huge round of applause for Brian Stewart.
Thank you, Vic. Everybody hear me okay? I'm going to read the first chapter of the book that's the follow-up to The Deaths on the Black Rock, and it's currently out there looking for a home. At the centre of the novel is an investigation into a company called Caledonian Data, CalDat, which is suspected of being involved in moving money around to finance 5 far-right groups. The novel also looks at social media trolling and fake news. I'm going to read the first chapter, which, as all crime novels really should, has a murder. There's not too much blood and gore, but there's a wee bit of swearing because it is set in Glasgow. I hope that's okay. On the other side, I'll actually tell you who the murderer is, because these are uncertain times and I want to try and reduce stress in readers. So the novel, The Caldac Lies, Chapter 1. The murder at the Pacific Quay Hotel in Glasgow took place just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a grey, nondescript kind of June day. The murdered man was Derek Karatas. He was a young Turkish IT expert who was in Glasgow to demonstrate his new software to a group of young Scottish IT experts, along with a few interested others. This software was being hailed in some quarters as the solution to cleaning up social media. All looked forward to seeing what the latest beta release could do. There were many other such products on the market, of course, but this promised to be better. The murderer was Jimmy McBain, 55, unemployed, resident in nearby Govan. He had checked into the hotel just after 2 o'clock. He had dumped a small holdall in his room and gone to the conference suite where the demonstration was to be held and killed Derek Karatas with a large hunting knife he had brought with him. He also attacked a young waitress, Becca Gray, who had been there setting out cups and saucers and biscuits. Despite her injuries, Becca managed to escape downstairs to the reception area. She collapsed through the door into the arms of Dom Watson, who had been about to go up to the conference suite. Watson, small, dark and dapper, more like a funeral director than an IT specialist, laid Becca on the carpet and fished out his mobile, thumb on the screen. Philippe, the receptionist, started to try to determine the extent of Becca's injuries. Much of her white blouse was now bright red with blood, and she was almost unconscious. Watson and Philippe looked up in horror as McBain came through the door to the stairway, eyes wild, clutching his knife and roaring, "Fuck the immigrants, Scotland for the Scottish, purify Scotland." Blood covered the knife, his hand, much of his forearm, and some of his face and hair. His jumper and jeans were stained with it. Watson left Philippe tending to Becca and stepped back, phone to his ear now, asking for ambulance and police. His eyes stayed on McBain. The man was thin, almost emaciated, his thin grey hair unkempt, his thin grey face unshaven, lined and angry. McBain stood stock still, looking round. Then his eyes dulled and his voice was a whisper as he said, "Purify Scotland, immigrants out." He pointed the knife at Becca's prone body and Philippe moved himself round to shield her. But McBain simply dropped the knife to the carpet, turned and headed for the main entrance. The crowd that had begun to gather, people from the bar, people who were just in to use the Wi-Fi, people who had come for Karatas' demonstration, parted for him. A woman appeared behind the reception desk and lifted the phone. "This is the Pacific Quay Hotel, Glasgow. My name is Katia Morgan. I am the manager. I need police and an ambulance very quickly. Hurry." Watson showed her his mobile. "I already called them." Katia frowned at him. Philippe held Becca. "You'll be okay," he said. "Becca, you'll be okay." Her breathing was growing shallower. "Becca, stay awake. Stay with me. Help is coming." "The ambulance is on its way," Katia said. She crossed the reception area to the main entrance, the doors sliding open. Another man emerged from the stairwell door, Klaus, the assistant manager. "It's Mr. Karatas, he's been stabbed." He saw Becca limp on the floor. "Oh my Jesus Christ, what's happened?" Katia turned towards Klaus to ask about Karatas. There was a sigh of brakes, another thumping sound from outside, and she turned back to look and raised her hands to her mouth. "My God," she ran out. Philippe was stroking Becca's hair. "Ambulance is coming," he said. "Stay with us, Becca. The ambulance is coming. Somebody go with Klaus, find out what's happened upstairs." Dom Watson's mobile rang. He checked the display and moved further away from everyone to answer the call. "Julia." "Hi, Dom. Look, I'm running late, but I should be there within half an hour." Watson took a deep breath. Turn around, Julia. Don't come here. What? There's been an incident. Derek Karatas has been stabbed. Oh God, how is he? I don't know. I guess it's pretty bad. A waitress was stabbed too. Some nutcase went mental. Look, you just go back to Edinburgh. No point coming here. You'll just get involved in a police investigation. Shit. Okay, thanks, Dom. And probably don't post anything on social media, Julia. I won't. I'll be in touch, Dom. Thanks again. Dom Watson put his mobile away and stood helpless while Philippe tried to comfort Becca and the small group of people looked on. Finally, they heard the sirens and saw the blues and reds strobing outside on the main road. In her flat in Edinburgh that evening, Julia Ross MSP was trying to watch some kind of drama on TV while not looking at Twitter on her phone, but she couldn't resist picking it up, scrolling through the tweets. Hashtag Pacific Key Martyr was trending. The story was emerging of a plot by immigrants that had been thwarted, about a Scottish working class man who had made a stand against a Muslim invasion and been ruthlessly cut down. She read, growing angrier by the minute, checking for the ideas of the people writing these tweets, spotting the fake accounts and the bots, until at last she dropped the mobile onto the sofa again and lifted her wine glass, looking beyond it, above the TV, to the tenements across the way, the glow in the sky from the city's streetlights. She felt sad for Derek Karatas, whom she had never met. By all accounts, his software had been promising. What would happen now? She picked up the phone again and read some of the notifications, tweets about herself, before throwing it down again in despair. The campaign against her had been running for years. Every time she spoke in the Parliament, people would pile in online to criticise her. Paradoxically, she was regularly body shamed while still featuring on the hashtag Shaggable MSP list. The criticisms were most hateful and sweary when she spoke about cleaning up the internet or about the rights of LGBT and transgender people. She stared at the television and looked forward to being back in her proper home in the open spaces to the west of Inverness at the weekend. She'd be able to work on her keynote address for the LGBT conference she was due to speak at in a couple of weeks. She'd be able to go for walks in the clean air with her dogs and her husband and her son. In another flat in Edinburgh, a young man sat in his armchair with his headphones on as he listened to some country music, a glass of Lagavulin in his hand, his face expressionless. So, he was thinking, that hadn't quite gone to plan. That's it for me. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you so much for that, Brian. Really enjoyed it. Okay, now for something really, really exciting. Usually when we do Noir at the bar in a bar, we have what's called a wild card to close our show. We haven't done it in the virtual bar until now. So what we've done is we've got a short list of readers and we've put them into a different hat. Yes, I have more than one hat. This is a baseball cap. We've got 9 on the short list. We've put them into this hat and I'm going to draw our wild card at random. They will start our third act for us. So drum roll, please. This is really exciting. It is Paul Davidson. Paul, I will message you during the break to give you a bit more information. So huge round of applause, everybody, for Paul, because he will be joining us at the beginning of Act 3. But for now, we have what we're calling a retro quiz. It is one of the first that we ever ran and has been replayed for those who might not have been with us back in April when all this started. So sit back, relax, play the quiz, see how many you get, and enjoy the music. It's provided by Jason Isaacs. Good Lord. I'm blonde for a reason, you know. So after I tell you that we're having a retro quiz in silence, like it was in the old days, I'll then tell you the music's from Jason Isaacs. The music later is from Jason Isaacs. I am blonde for a reason. Anyway, got 3 readers coming up for you. We've already had one nomination for Quote of the Week. So if you hear anything you like, drop it in the chat box. Don't forget the Q&A. Next up, though, is Rachel Bennett. Another nervy one tonight, so let's be lovely, lovely, lovely to her, as always. Rachel Bennett hails from the Isle of Man, land of motorbikes, tailless cats and changeable weather. I think we're all suffering from that today. Rachel works as a librarian in the local rural library. And yes, she occasionally does get to drive the mobile library, which is the best job ever. The Flood, Rachel's first thriller, was published by One More Chapter last year, and Little Girls Tell Tales is out now in ebook, with the paperback to follow on the 20th of August, which is next Thursday. So get your pre-orders in while you can, folks. Everybody, the fab Rachel Bennett.
Hello, I just applauded myself. I don't know why. Hello, can everyone hear me? Okay, yes. Hello, I'm so excited. I'm also extremely warm. I bought a fan. Going old school, there we are. So yes, thank you very much to Vic and Simon for having me here. Thank you everyone for coming along. I'm so excited. I'm going to read an extract today from my new book, which is Little Girls Tell Tales. It's set on the Isle of Man, where I'm based, and it's set up at the north of the island in an area of boggy marshland called the Currachs. If you're not familiar with the island or that area, here's some fun facts about the Currachs. It used to be farmland. Farmers drained the water and used it as pasture. And then about 80 years ago, the land was reclaimed by nature, and now it's a nature sanctuary with willows and bog land. But you can still see the remains of the old walls of the fields and the houses and things, with the trees and roots growing over them. So it's this amazing area. Second fun fact is it's inhabited by wallabies. A bunch of wallabies escaped from the local wildlife park about 50 years ago, and they're now an indigenous species on the Isle of Man. Third fun fact is my friend got lost up there in that area. He stepped off a path to follow a wallaby trail and was lost for over an hour before he found his way back to the car. This fascinated me, partly because it's very on brand for my friend, but also the idea of a strange, unnerving, almost unworldly place where you can get lost, because there's so few places, especially on our doorstep these days, where you could literally lose yourself. And I knew I wanted to set a story there. So Little Girls Tell Tales is about a young girl who gets herself lost in the Currachs, and she stumbles across a body, a skeleton that's obviously been there for a long time. But by the time she finds her way out of the bogland, she can't remember exactly where she found the skeleton. So therefore she can't lead people back to it, and nobody believes her that it happened at all. So this chapter is from right at the start, where Rosalie finds the skeleton. She went out to play with her brother Darlin, but they got separated. So that's the background to it. Here we go. The path was reassuringly solid, but the ground on either side was muddy and soft. My blue wellies left perfect imprints. On either side of me, standing pools of water gave off a sweet, stagnant smell. The air was heavy and damp with humidity. Above the treetops, there was nothing but the round bowl of the sky dotted with clouds. It made me dizzy. It was maybe 5 or 10 minutes later when I looked around and realized I was alone. I paused to listen. Darlin would still be talking, I knew. His voice had been a constant drone throughout the summer holidays, half comfort and half annoyance. But now I couldn't hear him. The only noise was soft bird song, water dripping from leaves, and the murmur of wind in the trees. Darlin must have been somewhere ahead. I'd fallen behind a little, then a little more, until he was out of sight. But soon enough he'd realised I was being slow and he'd wait for me. I kept walking. It didn't occur to me I might be lost. The wetlands weren't that big or sprawling. Probably they were no bigger than the plantation of pine trees near Douglas where me and Dad went out for walks, and I'd never managed to lose myself there. But the Currachs were different. Everything was flat with no landmarks. There were plenty of paths, dozens of them, but many led in circles or disappeared into bogs. I walked for some time thinking, if I was thinking at all, that I was bound to catch up with Darlin soon. I figured I'd come around a clump of trees and there he'd be waiting for me with a sarcastic remark. But I kept walking and I remained alone. In the mud off to one side, I spotted several elongated parallel footprints, wallaby tracks. They led off along an ill-defined trail that headed in what I thought was the direction of the road. I stepped off the path to follow the trail, even though it soon became little more than a line of slightly firmer ground between the stagnant mud puddles. A few broken chunks of stone protruded from the earth here and there, the remains of a wall marking the edge of someone's land, or maybe part of a sheep pen which would lead me round in a loose circle, perhaps part of someone's house. There were no clues. Everything had been swallowed by the trees. At that point, I began to feel frightened, not because I was alone or possibly lost, neither of which were new experiences for me, but by the evidence of history around me, of time reclaiming the land. 100 years ago, there'd been people living here, but now there was nothing left except the faint tracery of the walls they'd built. It shocked me to think that time would eventually sweep away the fragments of my own life, the crooked trees tangling over everything that made me unique and memorable. Later, weeks, months, years later, I would piece the days back together from fragments of memory, looking for signs and argos I should have spotted. There must have been something to warn me my life was about to change. Was it significant the way the wind dropped to an eerie calm, or how the wild geese clattered somewhere off in the distance, or how I spotted those clumps of bogbean, that beautiful delicate white flower Mum had told me to look out for, growing in sudden abundance in an otherwise unremarkable clearing. It was the flowers that made me pause. The trail I'd been following had petered out to nothing. Ahead, the ground looked boggier, like it might not take my weight. I stopped. The bogbean flowers on their slender stems nodded in the gentle breeze. They poked up between a tangle of sticks in a muddy pond. The sticks were whitish grey, stripped of their bark. I studied the jutting curve of the sticks where they emerged from the water. It took me a surprisingly long time to recognise it as a ribcage. I'd never seen one in real life, of course, but I'd seen a plastic skeleton nicknamed Boney M at the St John's Ambulance headquarters in Douglas. What I was confronted with now didn't look much like Boney M. The ribcage, if that's what it was squashed and malformed, with half the ribs bent at the wrong angle. The bones were discoloured to the same greenish grey as the lichen on the trees. An arm, a possible arm, I told myself, was loosely attached at the shoulder by tatters of greyish material. The hands could be under the water, tucked up beneath the chest, sleeping, peaceful. I brushed aside a few bogbean stems and found what might be the skull. It was partly submerged. Above the water was a smooth curve, part of the eye socket and the edge of the jaw, complete with a few grimy teeth. The lower jaw had fallen open or fallen away. One of the molars at the back had a filling in it, grey metal, like the ones my aunt showed when she laughed too loud. I straightened up, suddenly dizzy. It was a person. I'd found a person. An unpleasant tingle of surprise worked its way through my stomach. What should I do? In movies, if someone discovered a skeleton, they screamed or cried or threw up or ran away. None of those reactions seemed justified right then in that sun-dappled clearing, with the birds calling from nearby trees. This wasn't someone who had died yesterday or the day before or even a week ago. No one was looking for them. There was no blood, no guts, not even a particularly bad smell, or at least no worse than the rotted vegetable smell of the mud itself. So, instead of fear or disgust, I felt only sadness. Who was this person? How come they ended up here? I took a step closer, my boots sank deep into the mud. I jerked back in a hurry. The mud sucked at my boot as I pulled it loose. I stumbled back breathless. The first sting of fear hit me then. This was such a lonely place for someone to die. What if the person had been just like me, a little bit lost and a little bit abandoned, and she'd stumbled into the mud and couldn't get out? If I got stuck, would anyone hear my shouting? How long would Darlin search for me? What if I was never found? It was that thought which sent me stumbling away onto a barely delineated trail that switched back and forth and sometimes vanished altogether. I walked as quickly as I dared. My boots clomped over roots and stones. I almost blundered into another deep pocket of mud, and after that I forced myself to go slower. I had no way to measure time. Later, a great many people would tell me I'd been wandering out there for almost 3 hours. At the time, the minutes blended together until it felt like I'd always been walking. My legs ached and my calves were chafed red raw by the top of my wellies. When I at last stumbled out onto a road, far from where I thought I was so numb and exhausted that I kept walking for another half-dozen steps before I noticed I was no longer amongst the trees. Then a woman I didn't recognise snatched me up and started shouting, "She's here! Rosalie's here! We found her!" Like I was an Easter egg that had been hidden too well, rather than a 10-year-old girl who was so tired she could barely stand. Someone put a warm jacket around my shoulders. Someone else gave me a packet of biscuits, a whole packet, just put them in my hand and told me to eat as many as I wanted. And then Mum was there, crying and gasping like she'd been drowned, pulling me into a crushing embrace. The biscuits were squashed between us and ended up mostly as crumbs. Where were you? Mum asked into my tangled hair. Where did you go, Pumpkin? I pulled away so I could see her face, and I said, I found a dead person. And that's it. That's it. There we go. Oh my gosh, I'm so warm. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Vic. I will pass you back now.
Oh, you won't though, because we've got a couple of questions.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I thought I was off a hook.
You're so close to being done. Kevin Ferguson says, great reading by Rachel, but I'm equally intrigued by the wee gonk with the big eyes beside her book on the shelf. Who's that?
That will be Buttercup from the Powerpuff Girls.
Excellent.
Cheers. Buttercup, I probably got the wrong one now. It's either Buttercup or it's Blossom. No, I think it's Buttercup.
Fret not.
So she looks out for me. This is my in my big wall of random stuff. It's about the most picturesque thing in my house that I could put behind me.
Thank you. And Alex Hawley would like to know, as a librarian, who inspired you to write, and have you started back at work yet?
Yes, I've started back at work. We're very lucky on the Isle of Man, but we haven't been as badly affected as everyone. The library bus is able to get back on our routes again. We've been dropping books off to people's doors and doing knock door run, just dropping them on the doorstep and running away. But Friday I get to drive the bus for the first time in ages, so that's fantastic. I've been really inspired by, there's some fantastic Manx authors as well. If you want to read more about stuff and things on the Isle of Man, crime writers like Chris Ewan, who was on a few weeks ago, CMU, and Rona Halsall and Elizabeth Brooks, they are all wonderful and they've really inspired me.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
Enjoy your wine.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so who is next? Let's give this a good go. Okay. It is one of our late additions, Paul Finch. Allow me to tell you about Paul. Paul Finch is an award-winning Sunday Times bestseller. His latest novel is One Eye Open, which publishes on the 20th of August, next Thursday, and is available to pre-order now. Paul studied history at Goldsmiths before becoming a police officer in the northwest of England, and then followed a career in journalism and screenwriting. He lives in Lancashire with his wife Kathy and their two four-legged companions, Buck and Buddy. So everybody, huge round of applause for Paul Finch.
Hi everyone, thanks for that, Vic. Well, thanks for having me. What I'm going to read tonight is an excerpt from my new book. Oops, it's inverted, of course. It would be One Eye Open, which is my first title from Orion. I've written a number of books for Avon at HarperCollins, the Mark Heckenberg series, the Lucy Claiborne series, but when I moved to Orion, they wanted something different. So it's a standalone cop thriller, a bit of a change from my previous work, and this one has a rural setting. It's set along the Essex-Suffolk border. I introduce a new character, Detective Sergeant Linda Hagan, who was a former CID officer, but because she had kids and she wanted to, she's married with kids, she wanted to be at home with the kids as much as she possibly could be. She transferred to accident investigation at traffic, so she'd work Monday to Friday, 9 till 5-ish. The book opens when Linda is sent to a particularly grisly crash site. Two very seriously injured persons, both unconscious, but she very quickly starts to notice a significant number of anomalies, which inevitably, as she starts to investigate, leads her into a web of organised crime. What I thought I'd do is, rather than just give you the intro, I thought I'd pick a scene out from a little bit further into the book where Linda and her regular sidekick, Detective Constable Clive Atkins, are pursuing a witness, a Polish girl who's a heavy drug user. For some reason, she doesn't want to give them a statement, and she's off on her toes. They pursue her, and she leads them to a derelict holiday park. Linda headed downhill, and a few seconds later was amid the caravans. The place clearly hadn't been used in several years. The caravans themselves sat in orderly rows with narrow shingle passages between them, but they were static structures on crooked legs rather than wheels, their paintwork drab and scaling off, their windows grimy and cracked. Linda moved from one junction to the next, but there was no sign of anyone flitting about. Damn, she breathed. After she'd been wandering like this for several minutes, she dug her phone out. I'm bringing the car around now, Clive said, breathless. According to the sat-nav, there's an entrance to that old park on Viewpoint Road. Park across the entrance, yeah? Then come in on foot. Will do, he said. Not that this felt as if it would help. Assuming the Polish girl was still here, there were any number of spots where she could get out. Irritated, Linda went left and then right, taking turns at random, and heard a dull thud. She halted. A distant wind hissed over the nearby sea, but there was nothing else. She couldn't even hear the rumble of traffic. She pivoted around, trying to work out which direction the noise had come from, settling on a passage which, as far as she could tell, ran roughly north. She ventured along it. The temptation was to shout out and explain her purpose here, but that probably wouldn't yield a result. Junkies caught in possession tended not to trust the word of any copper. Of course, this created a potential additional problem. If the girl was bent on evading custody and she had a couple of syringes with her, these could quickly be turned into weapons. And if they'd already been used, another thud, this time from behind her. Linda spun around. The caravan looming at her rear was indistinct from most of the others. Once white or cream-coloured, now a yucky brown, moss crabbing its few bits of tarnished metalwork. The inside of the window facing her was so thick with dust that it was virtually opaque. A faint shaft of light was just visible inside, presumably from a skylight, the lumpy shadow of some heavy, shapeless bit of furniture framed against it. A skylight in the roof. Linda's eyes strayed to the caravan's upper parapet, as if she expected to find a figure crouching there, about to leap down on her. But there was no one. Thinking about those syringes had spooked her, she realised. She glanced at the window again before heading away, and saw that the shadow was no longer there. Linda stood rigid before jolting to life and scrambling around the caravan's exterior looking for the door. It was on the far side, still closed, though fragments of moss that had once covered the join between the door and the jamb now hung loose. She called Clive again. I'm just parking up, he said. Where are you? Absurdly, she realised that she couldn't tell him. She'd come a considerable distance into the caravan park, but it wasn't like she could give him directions. Just make your way in and fast, Linda said. Keep your ears pinned back. She cut the call and listened again, hearing nothing from the interior. Fitting her gloved fingers around the door's edge, she held her breath and yanked it open. Anya? She said. There was no response from the dim, dank interior. I'm Detective Sergeant Hagan from Essex Police. I know you think you're in trouble, but you're not. I just want to speak to you about someone you may know. The silence lingered, a very complete and profound silence, as if there was no one there. Linda stepped up into the doorframe, glancing left and right. Inside, it smelled of mildew and was cluttered with decrepit junk. Old clothes, old furniture, old boxes, everything dense with dust and cobwebs. Crooked passages led left and right. Overhead there was indeed a skylight, though only weak light leaked through thanks to its coat of dirt. I repeat, she said aloud, all I need to do is speak to you. Nothing stirred. She peered left, her eyes drawn to what appeared to be a shadowy, upright form. She approached it slowly, the breath tight in her chest. As she did, it resolved itself into a person standing with their back turned. A long oilskin coat covered most of the figure, while what looked like a broad-brimmed wedding hat sat on the head. The backs of 2 boots were visible below. Anya, we need to talk. The figure didn't move. We need to talk about Jill Brooks. Again, nothing. Look, Anya, you're not in trouble. Linda was now within touching distance. She reached out, but I'm not playing this childish game. Gently, she tapped the figure's shoulder. It rocked. The coat fell off, revealing a coat stand. Linda stared at it, pink-cheeked, before turning around too quickly, tripping on a divot torn in the rotted carpet and falling backward against the stand, which toppled over. With a furious bang, A door flew open a few yards back along the caravan, the door to the lavatory, and a figure, a real one this time, came out in a blur of speed. And there we go. Thanks for that. Thanks for letting me read that, Vicky.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. Claire Sheldon's asked, does this mean there is no more Mark Heckenberg?
No.
Heckenberg even, sorry.
No, it doesn't mean that. It's the next Heckenberg book has already been written, but when I moved from HarperCollins to Orion, Orion just wanted to start off with something a little bit new and different from what had been done previously. But no, anyone who's a fan of the Heck books can rest assured there are more to come.
Excellent, that will allay the fears. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm delighted that your internet held up as well in these.
Yes. Well, the sky is bright yellow outside, so I'm not sure how much longer it would have lasted for.
How serendipitous. Thank you very much. Okay, we have one more reader until we go to the break. So it is going to be Will Carver. Allow me to tell you about Will when I get information. Okay, Will Carver is the author of the January David series and now the very loose DS Pace series. Good Samaritans was shortlisted for the Best Independent Voice at the Amazon Publishing Readers Awards. Woo! It was also a Book of the Year in the Telegraph, Guardian and Express. Nothing Important Happened Today was longlisted for the Glass Bell Award and Theakson's Crime Novel of the Year Award. Whew. A Book of the Year in the Telegraph as well. Wow. Will's new novel is Hinton Hollow Death Trip, and that is currently longlisted for Not the Booker Prize. Don't hold this next bit against him, but Will Carver is one of those vegans. Anyway, he wrote that, not me. Anyway, really, really thrilled that we finally managed to get Will Carver on Virtual Noir at the Bar, so please give him a huge round of applause.
Mute myself. Right, I'm in. Hey, so I'm going to read from Hinton Hollow Death Trip. Don't let the flowers fool you. This is the third book in the Detective Sergeant Pace series, but you don't need to have read the other two. It's a very loose series. Everything, you could read the books in any order. I'm going to read probably 2 or 3 sections from the prologue. I might actually time myself just so I stay within the limit here. Yes, so all you really need to know is that the novel is narrated by Evil itself. So I will be speaking as Evil tonight. Here we go. Prologue, where you will be introduced to a boy on a train, a detective, a pig hater, a food lover, a window breaker, and your narrator. Don't read this. You can leave now if you want. Don't even bother finishing this page. Forget you were ever here. There must be something else you could be doing. Get away. Go on. This is the last time I tried to save you. Go and work out. Cook yourself something from scratch instead of ordering in. Binge on that TV show everyone is talking about. Enroll yourself in that night school photography course because you will think this is strange. Then it will make you angry. Then it gets worse. I know what you're thinking. Who am I to tell you what to do? Okay, don't listen. You won't anyway. It's a small story. That's what you're getting here. A small town with small lives that you'd never have known about if you'd left when you had the chance. Hinton Hollow, population 5,120. There's a crossroads. You can see the park from the woods and the school rooftop just beyond. There's a bench in between now where it happened. The golden plaque screwed into the wooden seat is for the young boy. The message from his older brother and his father. The mother isn't mentioned, of course. It's less than a minute to drive into the centre of Hinton Hollow, but people in this town tend to walk. That will take 7 minutes at a brisk pace, 10 minutes on the way back because it's slightly uphill and you often have a bag of shopping. It takes Mrs. Beaufort twice as long, but she's much older and she had that scare with her chest when it all happened. The summers seemed to stretch on for an extra month, keeping the skies light and the air warm. Parents had no need for the autumn cardigans that lined the racks at Rockaby, but still they bought them because that's what you do in Hinton Hollow. It's the same reason there's still a bakery on the high street, though bread is much cheaper in the supermarkets of neighbouring towns and it lasts longer. There's one pub that everyone goes to, the Arboreal, and Four Bears Independent Bookshop, which refuses to go out of business. Hinton Hollow was safe. It was exactly the same as it had always been, a place preserved, existing in a time that has long since passed. Then I came, and I didn't care about any of that. It took 5 days, small time for a small story, but long enough to touch every path and shop front, to creep through every alleyway and caress every doorstep, to nudge almost all who lived there as I passed through. I'm not sorry. The more awful people become, the worse I have to be. It's getting harder to be me. So if you're not at the gym or boiling some pasta or scrolling through Netflix, it means that you didn't go. You didn't take my advice. You're still here. And I'm still here. That says it all, doesn't it? You want to know. You want to know about evil. That thing around his neck. You will think she's an awful mother. You will judge her. Judgment has been around for as long as I have, but I find in recent times, judgment comes quicker and it's louder now. Little Henry Wallace is 8 years old, but looks like he is 6. And that boy is more than 100 miles from home when somebody finally talks to him. They ask him where his mother is, but he doesn't answer. He's not allowed to talk to strangers. That buys him 6 miles. It's another mile before anybody notices the thing around his neck. The mother wasn't always mad, something to do with the father walking out one day. He left a note and some unanswered questions. Quite the scandal in a place like Hinton Hollow. It changed her. People looked at her differently. Little Henry Wallace, on the train alone, is still. He doesn't seem frightened at all, just doing what his mother told him. He's to sit in the carriage and not talk to anybody, not until they ask him about that thing around his neck. While travellers are more vigilant in current times, they're often drawn to a person of a certain age, sex, and ethnicity when a backpack is left on a seat. They're not looking out for a boy, 8 years of age, who only looks about 6. You may tell yourself that you would have talked to little Henry Wallace before this point, but you too would have waited. It doesn't look right, does it? That's what stops you from approaching. A note on bystander behaviour. You wait because you think somebody else will help. You hope they will. You are scared because you don't know the outcome. You want to feel safe. You are the most important person to you. Henry has an older brother. The mother didn't put him on a train with something around his neck. She kept him. She kept him with her in Hinton Hollow, 107 miles away. And now there are 4 people around her son on a train bound for the north of England, and the elderly woman has grabbed something hanging around the boy's neck. What's this? She's not asking little Henry Wallace or her fellow passengers. She's thinking out loud. Then, within a few seconds, she's reading out loud. My name is Henry Wallace. I am 8 years old. My mother put me on this train to get me away. I can't tell you where I came from until I have had 7 sleeps. Please take care of me until then. The elderly lady looks at the young boy's face. He's not afraid. She turns to the 3 passengers who have also taken an interest in the boy's welfare. Then she moves back to the boy and turns over the brown label in her hand that hangs on a string around little Henry Wallace's neck. This time, she reads in her head, Please take care of my boy. I'm scared. Something is coming. One thing to know about the elderly woman, she does not stand by. I'll read one more bit. It's very short. I like it there. I have bigger stories, of course. You think of wars and famine and plagues. I was there. If you believe in Jesus, then you believe I was at his crucifixion. But I'm not Hitler. I'm not influenza. I am not Judas. I may appear to some with red horns, but I am not him. I do not hold the knife and I do not pull the trigger. People do that. My job is to caress and coax and encourage. But I'm not Harold Shipman or pancreatic cancer. I do not administer the lethal dose of morphine and I do not press the button that releases the napalm. It is people that do that. I am not death with his skeletal face and robe and side and his tap on the shoulder. I am evil. I am the killer clown nightmare. I am the deviant sexual thought. I am your lack of motivation, your disintegrating willpower. I am one more drink, one more bite, one more time. I do not stab, I do not rape, I do not pour the next gin, but I am there. Are you still here? This is difficult to explain with the big stories. That's why I've chosen one of the smaller ones. That's why I've chosen Detective Sergeant Pace. I'd been with him, watching him, gently maneuvering him into place. He was not inherently evil. That is rarer than you think. But like cancer, all of you have the ability to develop into something darker and more cynical. I can bring that out in you. I brought it out in him. With every case I chipped away, making him question his own involvement with each event. He blamed himself more and more with every subsequent victim he could not save. Then I appeared to him, burning across his walls and over his ceiling. I trapped him in his paranoia and danced black flames around his life until he snapped. I didn't fuck the wife of a serial killer. I did not handcuff somebody to a tree and leave them to die. No, because only people do that. Detective Sergeant Pace left. He packed one small case and took the first train home to Hinton Hollow. And I went with him. I like it there. This was my second trip. There you go. Oh, 7.5, that'll do.
Well played, Will, well played. We've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Alex Hawley would like to know what you are drinking to go with your reading this evening.
Well, I found a Beck's in the fridge that I think a friend left over here recently, and I have a whiskey. Just, I didn't know how long it would go on for, so I've got that for after, yeah.
And Alex wants to know what kind of whiskey it is.
I can't remember. My mum bought me a bottle of Writer's Tears. I know.
Excellent.
Cliche.
And Bookmark That would like to know, why did you choose to make Evil in Hinton Hollow an it instead of male or female?
But because I want the reader to decide. A lot of what I write is getting the reader involved in the story and making their mind up about things. To me, I think when I think of Evil, I think of a he. And I think most of the people who've read and reviewed have gone with a he. And that's just where we are in the world now, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a real pleasure to host you. Thank you. Okay, so another announcement coming. I know you like to use the breaks to top off your drinks, have a smoke, whatever, but you maybe want to stick with us for this one. We'll see you in 5. Welcome back. Have you signed up yet? You should. Anyway, yeah, we've gone completely retro this week. I was going to say this year. We've gone completely retro, so we've just decided to have silent breaks this week. So, yeah, Jason couldn't make it. Anyway, I don't know why I'm shaking the hat. It's Paul Davidson's turn, our wild card. So his name was pulled at random from the Not Ratty, Not Tatty hat. Because it's a wild card, I don't have an intro for Paul. So really delighted to have him as our first wild card at Virtual Noir at the Bar, Paul Davidson.
Hi there, hi everyone. Thank you very much for picking me from the hat. It's the first time I've ever been picked from the hat. Okay, my name is Paul Davidson. I live in London. I've just come back from Brazil after 10 years there, during which time I wrote 5 novels, trying to get them published. I came back here with all sorts of plans to face COVID, Boris and Brexit. So I haven't been able to do very much. But this novel is a domestic noir set in Sao Paulo, and it's really a social critique as much as anything. It looks at the sort of entitled lives of the middle class there, people who elected Bolsonaro, and features a couple, Gina and Angela Meinhard, who are up-and-coming middle-class characters, who, after a very bizarre accident, their privileged background begins to unravel and their family starts falling to pieces. So this is from towards the beginning. It's the scene where the bizarre accident happens. And I'll start here. As I say, the novel is called A Death in Sao Paulo. Gina Meinhard sniffed at the cream leather upholstery. Her daughter Safi and her friend Tammy had been out in the car the previous evening. God, what have they been doing? But there was no need to ask. She knew that smell. The gear stick sank neatly into the reverse notch. Gina let her foot off the brake. The Pirelli Quartet screeched an insolent discord on the resin-soaked concrete as the Alfa 156 jumped back across the garage. She backed out of the automatic doors, bumped onto the road, and heaved the wheel eastward. It pleased her to hear the lusty 2-litre engine growling its approval, grateful to be back on the road. Not wanting the smell of skank weed to outdo her bamboo Gucci, Regina Meinhard wound the window half down and cursed the mechanic. She paid 3,000 reais for a new air conditioning unit, only to be told it would take 6 weeks, and that was 3 months ago. Now it was midsummer, almost Carnival, and no one could go anywhere without air. The light blue Alfa had been a steal at 30,000, and such a pretty one, everyone said so. Age was secondary, of course. An Italian car was the thing. German cars were like tanks. God only knew why Angela had gone for a BMW. But now she did the purchase. Perfect condition or not, things always went wrong when you buy second hand. Everyone was always out to trick you. She drove past the security box, empty again. A deserted room rested up against the wall. Where was Domingo? Off with next door's maid, no doubt. Out on Avenida Sumaré, the traffic was piling up and the smell of melting tarmac filled the air. Gina regarded the morning jam as something of a personal insult, everyone in the same boat without distinction. She didn't want to be in the same boat. She wanted affirmation of who she was. It was the government's fault, of course. Then there were the bus lanes, the motorcycle delivery boys, and the speed limits. No wonder nothing moved anymore, and the people who really counted couldn't get where they were needed. Hardly out of the coupe, Gina came to a halt on the inside of 3 lanes. She pulled down the visor mirror to check her makeup. Her fingers were fidgety. She needed a smoke. Grabbing her bag from the passenger seat, she extracted a cigarette and threw the bag back over the back. A motorbike drew up on the far side. She glanced across. The motorcyclist was bending down, looking at her. Her face was reflected in his visor. She smiled and turned back. God, where do these people come from? Never mind, light the cigarette. As she yanked the lighter from its socket, a sudden movement made her jump. A bare arm thrust its way through the half-opened window and an object pointed at her head. It took her a moment to realize it was a gun. She froze. A muffled voice demanded, "Give me the bag!" She would have given it freely. She didn't even care that it was a Louis Vuitton. Angela would have bought her a new one. He was her rock. But that day, it held both her Mac and her presentation. She couldn't lose them, not after 2 months slog and at the cusp of a career-defining moment. A surge of defiance broke her paralysis. The hell I will. Without weighing the consequences, she jabbed the cigarette lighter into the tattooed wrist, punched the window button shut, and stabbed at the accelerator. The Alpha gave a throaty roar and lurched forward, meeting the car in front with a crash of fenders. 2 figures had fallen from the bike. The one with the gun was trapped by his elbow in the half-closed window. In a panic, she threw the vehicle into reverse and smacked into the van behind. For a moment, she froze again. "Open the fucking window, bitch!" the motorcyclist screamed, waving his gun inside their cabin. She threw the car forward, rear-ending the vehicle in front, shifting it slightly to gain some space. The bastard would not be getting her computer, no way. He pummeled on the side panel and shouted to his cohort, "Do something!" The pillion ran up from behind. "What should I do?" It was a woman's voice. Scrambling to his feet, the robber twisted his arm to take aim, but Gina crashed the gears and the car lurched backwards a second time. With a deafening retort, the bullet tore through her hair and shot a hole through the roof. She screamed and ducked, turned the wheel, and thrust the gear back into drive. The car mounted the curb and met a concrete post. Gina stabbed the brake, wrenched the stick into reverse, and accelerated. There was a splintering of steel and glass as the Alpha gouged out the mid-panels of the car by its side. The adrenaline kicked in, and Gina had the feeling it was no longer her changing gear, bashing the pedals, spinning the wheel. Some instinctive creature had taken over. "Smash the fucking window!" the carjacker yelled. His companion picked a rock from the sidewalk, ran up, punched the rear window out, and reached in for the lock. Amid a shower of glass fragments that cascaded down the back of her blouse, Gina slammed the gear into drive. "Get the fucking door!" shouted the robber. "I'm going to kill this fucking bitch!" He fired again, and Gina's side window blew out. Gina gritted her teeth and spun the wheel to the right. Then she turned to find the gun barrel inches from her face. She ducked as the trigger clicked, but this time the chamber was empty. She let go the wheel, grabbed the outstretched arms with both hands, and bit deep into the wrist. There was a howl, and the gun swung about, sideswiping her nose. Falling back into the seat with the metallic taste of blood seeping down her throat, Gina knew she had to get away fast. But before she could act, the rear door flew open and someone was clambering in. Gina didn't know what gear she was in, but she hit the gas. The intruder was swung out sideways and the door slammed shut. Gina blinked and took stock. It was a miracle. At the new angle, there was space for the car to get off the road. She didn't wait. "Smash the front window," screamed the carjacker. "Free my arm." But Gina was already underway. She shook the glass from her hair and jammed the throttle to the floor. The post was to the passenger side and she knew exactly what was going to happen. She could see it even before it happened. In a heightened state of fear and fury, she was willing it on. The offside wheel hit the curb and the Alpha jumped across the sidewalk. A second later, there was a crisp smack as the motorcyclist's head hit the concrete post and his helmet split apart. A spurt of blood flew across the sidewalk and the passenger window turned crimson. From somewhere deep inside her, Gina let out an incoherent guttural roar. The Alpha was under its own command now. It knew its way home. It reached the corner, launched itself into the side turning, spun half about, and took off down the side street with the limp body flapping against the side panel, dragged along the road by the heel of its boots. Gina observed all this as if from afar and marveled at the power of the untamed universe. Okay, that's that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. That was brilliant. And you're getting some real love on social media and on our chat as well. So thank you very much. That was our first ever wildcard reader at VNAT B, Paul Davidson. So it is now time for the hat. I've just knocked the other one on the floor. Of course I have. Give us a drum roll, someone, will you? It is Kate Helm. Kate Helm worked as a journalist covering courts and crime, as a BBC correspondent before she started writing fiction. Ooh! She also wrote documentary and drama scripts, including the BBC One programme Angel of Death, the story of Beverly Allett. Kate's thriller, The House Share, was published in the middle of lockdown, so she hosted a series of online house party interviews on YouTube with writers including C.L. Taylor and Ellie Griffiths, both of whom have appeared at VNAB too. Check out our archives if you missed them. Kate Helm is a pen name for author Kate Harrison, who writes diet books that have been translated into more than 20 languages. The lovely Kate lives in Brighton, so everybody please give a huge VNAB welcome to Kate Helm.
Hi, hello. I'm sweating a bit here, so yeah, kind of we haven't got the storms yet down here in Brighton, but hopefully not too long to go. So yeah, I'm going to read from The House Share, which, well, it's kind of a lockdown nightmare. It was written well before lockdown, but here we go. When you're sharing a house with 7 murder suspects, you can't lock the danger out. And I'm going to read from the beginning. So we've got 2 potential flatmates who are coming into what could be a dream home or could be one to die for, as it's a thriller. It's probably the latter. Incredible people wanted for dream house share in Zone 1 warehouse. Do you have what it takes to join us in the best house share in London and quite possibly the world? The kind of person who will fit right in will be outgoing and interested in others, but not a complete party animal, committed to joining a sharing, socially responsible community. In return, we can offer a wonderful, spacious home from home in the heart of Bermondsey, just a few steps from London Bridge Station. Your own ensuite studio in a Victorian warehouse conversion, packed with Instagrammable original features and designer furniture. A programme of city zen, social activities and perks, including yoga, organic veg boxes, games nights, and even an honesty bar stocked with craft gins and low alcohol options. So to apply, please complete our online form. Tuesday the 24th of April, Imi. I don't belong here, anyone can see that. Even my best dress screams cheap compared to the sleek tailoring of the people I pass on Bermondsey Street. When I stop to check my hair in the window of a florist shop, I look like the porcelain Pierrot on my mother's mantelpiece, a single tear rolling down its pale cheek. Except I'm sweating, not crying. The makeup I applied in the staff room has melted during the journey to London Bridge. I sidle into an alleyway and try and fix my eyeliner, though really I should scrub it all off and start again. But I don't have time for that. Tanner's Walk is the next on the right. The thought makes my mouth go dry and I struggle for breath. The panic attacks have started up again in the weeks since Al threw me out. I try and remember the meditation my old therapist taught me, her lisping voice in my head. Imagine ripples flowing across a tranquil pond. Breathe with them. Everything is safe. Nothing can hurt you again. The panic ebbs away and my heart slows. Time to focus on being the ideal flatmate. I know I am anything but. I'm antisocial and neurotic and fearful, and I have zero interest in getting to know the people I live with. But I can pretend. I'm good at that. Of course, no one should have to jump through hoops for a roof over their head, but it's a fact of London life. After everything I've done, there's no way I'm going home to Mum and her house full of Pierrots and superstition. I pat my hair to flatten the frizz and turn right. Tanner's Walk is a cobbled street, narrower than it looks on Google Maps, barely wide enough for a single car. There's a terrace of houses and a hipster cafe on one side, but they're dwarfed by the brick warehouse opposite, the dye factory. I laughed out loud when I read the address in the email, so pretentious and so typical of round here, but the building itself is handsome, made of red bricks that glow in the early evening sun. The vast windows are framed by black metalwork, and the original wall crane projects out like a gallows with a timber platform that must once have lifted goods into the warehouse. The photos on the ad seem too good to be true, but the reality is even better. I try to imagine myself coming home to this every night after school. I could actually walk it in 50 minutes. Even when I was living with Alistair, the commute from Highgate took an hour and a quarter. And since he threw me out, I've been sleeping on mates' sofas in the suburbs, and the journey is usually twice that. I have to give this all I've got. I walk towards the tall warehouse doors, which are painted oxblood red. There's a brass plaque on with an engraved inscription. The dye factory is named after the leather tanning and colouring business that existed here during Victorian times. Next to it, there's a note asking interviewees to push the entry phone to be buzzed in, then take the lift to the top floor. Before pressing the button, I take a moment to psych myself up. From nowhere, I hear a sudden burst of laughter, high-pitched, almost hysterical. Children? I scan the street, trying to work out where it's coming from. There's no playground that I can see, and the cafe opposite is closed. I shake my head, but the laughter continues, shrill and familiar. Like a new mother, I cannot ignore the cries of children. If Icelanders have 100 words for snow, then I could invent just as many for the noises made by a class full of kids, their Monday morning moans, the tap, tap, tap of feet on lino, counting down to home time on a sunny afternoon. The chatter and hum I can hear now sounds like the build-up to a big fight that's been brewing all day. It's coming from above me. I look up, all makes sense. There's a terrace on the roof of the dye factory building, 4 stories up, and the noise comes not from kids, but from hyped adults. The competition, I guess. To win, I'm going to have to join them up there, flirt better, pretend better. I close my eyes, try to picture the eddies of the River Thames only streets away, to calm myself. I hear the fast whir of wheels, open my eyes to see a cyclist in a black hoodie speeding towards me on the narrow strip of pavement. Fast, too fast! He's heading straight for me. My body freezes, breath leaves my lung. Wake up, Imi. Don't be a victim this time, act. My hand goes to the pocket I've sewn into my dress, and my fingers close around the wooden handle of the small hunting knife. I twist out of the way moments before he ploughs into me, but one of the heels on my smart shoes catches between the cobbles. I trip over, my ankle twisting under me, and my 2 bags and the knife falling onto the stones. Shit! I reach for the knife first, as the bike stops millimetres from my body. Next, I grab my handbag. He's welcome to the tote bag. It's got nothing in it except Year 6 exercise books. Get away from me, I shout. Don't hurt me. I brace myself for a blow, but instead of trying to grab my stuff, he pulls the hoodie down to reveal his face. Not some thieving teenager, but a man my age. Handsome, too, like a young Idris Elba. I don't want to hurt you. He sounds almost as freaked out as I feel. I get to my feet, nerves shot, body still primed for fight or flight. Pavements are for bloody pedestrians. He shrugs. I didn't actually hit you, you fell. You were going too fast. If there's CCTV, you should be fined for what you just did. He looks alarmed, as though I'm actually going to call the police for something so trivial. I said sorry. He turns away from me, lifting up his bike, and presses the entry phone button for the dye factory. When a female voice answers, he says, "Hi, I'm Dex Shepherd, here for the interview." I cringe. He's here for the room too, and he's the perfect candidate. Good-looking, sporty, with a silly name. My reaction to him seems ridiculous now. And what if he saw the knife before I grabbed it back? At 3 inches, the blaze is just short enough to be legal. That's why I bought it, but it's not something I want people knowing about. The lock hums, and he pushes the factory doors open, carrying that fancy bike over the threshold with just 2 fingers. Titanium, like the outrageously expensive one Al bought for himself, but never used. I step towards the door. Dex turns sharply, wariness in his eyes. "Oh, you're here for the same reason as me, I guess." "Yes," I say. "I'm thinking, but I need this more." So there we go. That's from the house share, which can I give a mini plug? It is only 99p on Kindle at the moment, as is actually my first psych thriller. So bargain-tastic if you like that kind of thing. Back to you, Vic.
Thank you very much. I do have a question from Alex Hawley though. He's seen your interview with Tony Kent. Who is your dream person to interview in your kitchen?
Mine? Oh my goodness. Nigella. Yeah, Nigella Lawson. Just, you know, everything about her. Kind of, I love her. She's very, very gorgeous, and I really like her food, which maybe you wouldn't expect from a diet writer, but yeah, that's all things in moderation.
Excellent, thank you very much for that. That was a surprise answer. Brilliant stuff. So Kate's books are 99p on Kindle at the moment, don't forget that. We are down to our final 2 readers tonight. Yep, there we go. It goes quicker every week, doesn't it? Okay. Drum roll, please. It is Tom Benjamin. Tom Benjamin's Bologna set mystery was published at the end of May. Poor Tom, middle of lockdown, just ridiculous. The novel has received praise from the Times for its evocation of place, characterisation, and a plot that keeps you guessing, even when you think you know what's coming next. Tom managed to get the Daily Mail and Morning Star to agree that his was a promising debut, while the Herald Scotland described it as a slow-burning, tense and brooding thriller, which boasts the atmosphere and attention to detail that could only spring from a genuine love of the location, which is lucky because Tom actually lives there. Everybody, huge round of applause for Tom Benjamin.
Thanks, Vic. Yeah, it is rather lucky, and it's rather warm here in Bologna as well at the moment. But fortunately, we're used to it, so we have a bit of air conditioning, so that makes life a bit easier. Okay, I'm going to begin the novel in chapter 4, but to give you a little bit of a background, I'll read the blurb because it just seems to lead up to the point I'm about to read. When the body of a radical protester is found floating in one of Bologna's underground canals, it seems that most of the city is ready to blame the usual suspects, the police. But when private investigator Daniel Lester, son-in-law of the former chief of police, receives a call from the dead man's lover, he follows a trail that begins in the 1970s and leads all the way to the rotten heart of the present-day political establishment. So that's pretty much where I'm beginning here on chapter 4. And so I'll just go ahead. An English detective in Italy has certain advantages. For a start, Italians adore the British, or rather, at least before they made a hash of Brexit, deeply admired them for representing everything they believe they are not. Sober, pragmatic, and trustworthy. Those are pretty good credentials before you've even walked through the door. Add to that, from the nation that invented the giallo, an enduring affection for Agatha Christie and Arthur Conan Doyle, and you've got much the same reputation for detective work any random Italian visitor to the UK might have for cookery. The disadvantage is, of course, Italy. The Commandante had said that the 1970s was murky, but although the days of political terror may no longer have been with us, the country remained much as I imagined it had always been, only with a change of clothes and a sprinkling of new technology. So if you had told me I'd be a gumshoe when we'd arrived all those years ago, I'd have been on the first flight home. No, Lucia sold it to me as a chance to finally deliver my long-commissioned book on North London gang culture. What I'd failed to take into account, of course, was Italian gang culture. Families. Why rent when there's so much room here? We're a bit short-handed. Could you help out? Little by little, I became drawn in, and before I knew it, there was no going back. But it wasn't just about Lucia or my reluctance to wrench my daughter, Rose, from the world she knew following the accident. Anywhere else, not least my old stamping ground, would have seemed infinitely less vivid. I crossed Piazza Maggiore, a tour de force of the Italian centuries. To my left, the Baroque copper-green dome of Santa Maria della Vita rose behind the porticos of Palazzo dei Banchi. Ahead, the bulk of San Petronio, a church so large its construction was halted by a pope worried it was set to dwarf St. Peter's. I turned right into the courtyard of Palazzo del Curzio, once the home of Bishop Kings, and now the headquarters of the Commune, or City Council. I made my way toward a confetti-speckled corner where newlywed couples would emerge following their ceremony in the wedding salon, where Lucia and I, in fact, had stood more than a dozen years before. I could have taken a lift up to the second floor, but that would have felt like cheating. It was our corner, our memory, albeit one shared with all the other couples who had come down that broad stairway with its steps so shallow the bride was obliged to cling to the arms of her husband as she teetered toward waiting family and friends, as it had obliged Lucia to cling to me. Now I made my way briskly upward, alone. A speech from the event above echoed around me. I found the foyer busy with caterers and business people on phones. Salle Farnese was packed. There was a guy at the entrance with a clipboard, but when the crowds rose to applaud the mayor and he turned too, I took my chance and slipped in. Look around you and what do you see? Carlo Manzi was standing behind the lectern in the foyer of the town hall, every inch the leftist politician in his tailored navy sports jacket and open-necked man of the people shirt. Along with everyone else, I dutifully looked at the frescoes, a parade of soldiers, bishops and potentates, proceeding through Maggiore. When the commune commissioned these works from Cignani and Taruffi, the mayor continued, they set out to recall a source of tremendous municipal pride. Bologna had been chosen by the Pope as the venue for the coronation of Charles V, the new Holy Roman Emperor. Why? Because our city was second only to Paris in its reputation for learning and culture, and this was a reputation that persevered for centuries, that drew the young Copernicus, Cervantes, Michelangelo and Mozart to study here. Friends, we may have the oldest university in the world, but we also have one of the youngest populations in the country. Students from all over the globe come here to study, tomorrow's Mozarts, tomorrow's Michelangelos, even if. He paused, and we could clearly hear the demonstration outside. They can sometimes be a little exuberant. The mainly silver-haired audience laughed. This election event was as much for the TV cameras behind us as the audience, and the mayor was clearly in his element. I had at first been surprised to see so many old folk at a speech about the future of the city, but I shouldn't have been. Future hadn't meant digital startups. Carlo Manzi was preaching to property developers. And that's it. Back to you, Vic.
Thank you so much, and thanks for joining us tonight all the way from Bologna, Tom. That was brilliant, thank you. Okay, so one name left in the hat. I think you all know who it is. It is Caroline England. Caroline, I'm sorry, but somebody's got to be last. But we are delighted to have you here. So, author of Beneath the Skin, My Husband's Lies and Betray Her, Caroline England likes to write multi-layered, dark and edgy domestic suspense stories that delve into complicated relationships, secrets, lies, loves and the moral grey area. Drawing on her days as a divorce and professional indemnity lawyer, Caroline loves to create ordinary, relatable characters who get caught up in extraordinary situations, pressures, dilemmas, and crime. She admits to a slight obsession with the human psyche, what goes on behind closed doors and beneath people's facades. She also enjoys performing a literary sleight of hand in her novels and hopefully surprising her readers. I met Caroline at Newcastle Noir last year, and I am just absolutely thrilled to have her in the virtual bar tonight. So everybody, huge, huge, huge round of applause for Caroline England.
Thanks so much for a lovely introduction, Vic. I'm here today to have a little chat about my latest book, Betray Her, which came out just a few weeks ago, and here it is, this pretty old cover. So the story revolves around Joe and Kate, who've been close friends since they met in a musty dormitory at boarding school, aged 8. However, the friendship isn't all that it seems. There are dark secrets and jealousies beneath the surface that have shaped the women they are today. With a man in the mix, there's a tinderbox of emotion waiting to explode. So I'm going to read the prologue, but I need to do a little warning that it has sensitive content. So if I can find the prologue, here we go. Right. The current glints and sparkles as she gazes. It has been a good outing, fresh air, camaraderie and fun, freedom from the house too. Her whole body a little weightless, she's contented, relaxed, happy and high. The rain-speckled wind strokes her cheeks. Closing her eyes, she breathes in the musky fragrances of the countryside surrounding her, woody pine and damp conifers, rotting moss and wet grass. The pristine and crisp smell of the river too. Save for the hum of falling water in the distance, it's silent. She stretches and smiles. In this instant, she has everything she wants. It's a moment to capture. A sharp gust, and she's teetering, then tumbling down. Oh my God, she slipped. Instinctively holding out her arm, she gropes for something solid to protect herself from the fall. Nothing there but empty air, then the slap of the surface and shock of icy water. A powerless plunge into darkness hauls her down and down further. Liquid like bleach stings her nostrils, swamps her mouth, seals her throat. Raw survival setting in, she pins her lips shut and tries not to inhale. Swim. She needs to swim, get back to the top. Kicking out her legs, she tries, then again. Futile, so fruitless. Boots, too heavy. Blazer leaden with water. Weak, unduly weak. Paralysed limbs, frozen flesh. Nowhere left, no more room. A spasmodic breath, an acid deep in her chest. So dark, very dark. Inescapable tugging, insistent sucking, a swirl of murky depths. The arms of the dead drag her in. Pure and transparent, the blackness turns white. With it, realisation, as clear as a river. She didn't trip, she was pushed. Revenge, sweet revenge. The friendship, the bonding, the smile, the pretence. Cleverly biding her time and finally winning. Because that isn't very long, I just thought I'd sneak in, if you don't mind, a little introduction to my next book, which is due out in November, and it's called Truth Games. And well, it's due out in ebook and trade paperback in November. And I have to warn about sensitive language, sensitive content, but I also have to warn about my dreadful Irish accent. So you're warned. So here we go. This is the opening of Truth Games. It has to be the truth, the honest truth. Everyone agree? But what is truth? It's only a game, man. Besides, another slug and we'll know. 6 young adults in the high-ceilinged room. 2 cuddled on the sofa and 4 on the floor. A girl and 2 guys sit around a candlelit coffee table. Though late, it's still balmy, the leaded windows ajar. They're drinking Jack Daniels from shot glasses. The girl snaps open the second bottle and pours. Her nails are bitten, her nose pierced, her short hair dyed black. Her attention is focused on the man stretched out on the floor. Lifting his dark head, he glances at her. Isn't there anything other than that American shit? He asks. He goes back to his spliff and takes a deep drag. Okay, then we'll use the correspondence theory of truth, he says. A belief is true if there exists an appropriate entity, a fact to which it corresponds. If there's no such entity, the belief is false. The fair-haired boy laughs. Okay, genius, I'll start. Blue-eyed and neat-featured, he looks younger than his 20 years. A secret, a true secret. He knocks back the whiskey. I'm in love with somebody in this room. The girl whips up her head, her stark makeup barely hiding her shock. Tell us something we don't already know. This man is huge. His voice booms home counties. Come on, old chap. What did you say? The honest truth. Something you haven't told anyone before. Right, here's one. My mum tried to snog me once, he says. Everyone but the girl laughs. No, it's true, I'm not joking. Dad had buggered off, so she spent all the time drinking and crying. And snogging you? Yes, Your Honour. He guffaws. The truth and the whole fucking truth, eh? Only the ones, thank God, when she got close enough. I can't do needy. Fucking disgusting. A silence of drunk embarrassment, then the eloquent voice again. Are you 2 lovebirds playing? They turn to the couple on the sofa. The young woman is asleep. We're living our secret, her boyfriend says. But one you don't know, let me think. My brother and me, we used to spit in the takeouts. Special treat for the racists we knew from school. Nice. Nah, good try, but it won't put me off your delicious. I saw my father beat up my mum. The man on the floor looks fixedly at the ceiling, badly, watched the blood spurt from her nose, did nothing to stop him. The goth girl stares but doesn't speak. The blonde boy leans over. Fuck, he says, how old were you? Still a kid, but I blamed her, probably still do. He sits up and throws back his shot. Then he squints through the smoke at the girl, still sitting cross-legged and silent. What about you? Nice middle-class miss. You're not saying much. What's your secret? Everybody is watching, all eyes on her. A secret truth, she asks, turning to him, with an actual fact to which it corresponds. The man snorts. Yeah, come on, try me. She opens her inky lips. And that's it. Back to you, Vic.
Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I love the accent. I love the woman about the accent.
But it's hard, isn't it? Because you want to show different people speaking. So
you do grand. You did grand. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And sorry about you being last.
Oh, not to worry.
Okay, I've got to say, everybody. Okay, somebody who shall remain nameless, Danny Marshall, said that recently I looked like Holly from Red Dwarf, and I've googled Holly from Red Dwarf, and I hate to say it, I think he's right. When we started VNATB 20 weeks ago, we were just starting to go into the lighter nights, and I was having to put my lamp on, and now we're going into the darker nights and I'm beginning to have to put my lamp back on. So that is the passage of time, I guess. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us this evening. Thank you to our readers, Kate Helm, Sandra Ireland, Tom Benjamin, Brian Stewart, Caroline England, Abigail Osborne, Rachel Bennett, Draw Mashani, Paul Finch and Will Carver. And thank you very much to our wildcard reader as well. Thank you to Lloyd Cole for providing us with some groovy music to start the show. The rest was silent, as you know. Thank you to everyone who've donated over the last 20 weeks. Just a quick suggestion, if you enjoy Virtual Noir at the Bar, I'm going to pop a little link into the chat. What I've just put in there is a link to Effie Merrill's book launch on Saturday at 9 p.m. You need to register, but I'm going to be chatting to her about a bowl of cherries, a bowl of cherries. So get your name on the list now. So a little bit, something extra over the weekend. Thank you, as always, to lovely Simon Buick for all that he does. Technology, emails, marketing, just being Simon, giving me a laugh. Everything. He's just so good. Keep your eyes peeled for next week's email about next week's readers, which is our penultimate weekly Virtual Noir at the Bar. Try not to cry, okay? But we're going to put up the slide at the end of the evening again, just in case you want to register for what's coming up when VNATB finishes. Thank you everybody for joining us for VNATB 20, and we will see you next Wednesday.